Commitment Coordinator, political science professor at the college. And one of the things that we try to do with the Democracy Commitment is to try to promote civic literacy, cover current events, governmental processes. So last Tuesday, at the very last minute, decided to, put something together to kind of overview this government shutdown. I'm very lucky to be joined by my friend and colleague, Mary Dunkel.
Good morning, everybody.
And if you notice, she pretty much teaches almost everything on campus, political science, history, sociology, and she's the study abroad coordinator.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
I cannot find a pen, so that's kind of a problem. So
we'll delay here. Thank you for Troy for adding this in the library at the last minute. They're very busy today. There's a great event at 12:30 today. Mary's going to be pulling double duty. The title of the event is about the American Revolution and some of the philosophical underpinnings of it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So if you're free today at 12:30, please join us. So a couple of disclaimers here. I think this event can provide a lot of insight into governmental budgetary processes. And if you don't find that interesting, I think this could be a good sleeping pill, free of charge. You can listen to this right before bedtime, and I'm sure 10 minutes later you're going to be asleep. And another part, disclaimer, with this government shutdown, there's a lot of blame to go around. I think some of us have our own kind of party affiliations that we lean to, and maybe we're going to assign blame with one side based on our own political preferences. Try to have an open mind here. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. And then, I think there's a lot of nuance and complicated details here. I think I learned a lot about that. I've been teaching political science for 20 years. I learned a lot as I was trying to prepare for this. I didn't prepare for everything, so I'm sure you'll have questions that I can't answer. And I think that says something. This is just the budgetary process is really complicated and difficult to understand, and every aspect has other aspects that I think you also need to know. So that's why I'm trying to provide a little bit of context. And Mary's going to help out. She decided to join me even though she's completely overbooked, so it's going to help out on anything that I miss out on. So
no, he's got it covered. I'm just kind of here to be his wingman, if you will.
So we do have time for questions and comments. I think I'll go through about 12 slides or so, and then we'll open it up. So if there's anything that doesn't make sense, please let me know. So to start off with, and here's where it gets super exciting, a lot of the budgetary process that we're supposed to follow in Congress originated with this 1974 Congressional Budget Act. And this Budget Act does a lot of different things, but one of the things, of course, just to keep in mind that federal agencies can only spend money that Congress has appropriated to them. And in this Congressional Budget Act, they created this process where first the president creates a budgetary map, goals, if you will, and then Congress approves of this. They call it a budget resolution. This is supposed to happen in April 15th, and this is rarely ever achieved on time or at all. In the last 51 fiscal years, only 45 times did they have this blueprint of a budget done by April 15th. And if I'm not mistaken, the last time they did that, it's been a long time, so I'll just leave it at that. So they're supposed to create this roadmap of a budget by April 15th. That rarely happens. It didn't happen this year either. 1997 was the last time that this was done on time. So probably before many of us in this room were born. So that's a little bit of the background. This is a little bit of a framework of kind of this process. President submits the budget. There's markups in the House and Senate. There's a co-conference budget resolution. And then these spending bills are passed by the appropriations committees. And there's either kind of two ways. There can be a reconciliation vote or an authorization. And then the new fiscal year begins October 1st. And so that's when this particular, the most recent budget shutdown began, which was about 3 weeks ago.
So, Professor Navratil, I'm sure your American government students understand what's going on, but for those who maybe don't understand, Could you maybe talk a little bit about that relationship? So we know that Congress has the power of the purse, but that relationship between, just even briefly, about with the president and Congress and how that works, and like what appropriations committees are, maybe for those who may be watching that wouldn't understand.
Right.
Like just briefly.
And so that's one of the things that Mary's here to help. Sometimes we're going to use language that after doing this for a long time, you maybe just use it, and not many people don't understand what we're talking about. But I think what you mean is that the president is creating the budgetary goals and the framework, but then to your point, Congress has the power of the purse. So all money that is spent, any bill that's dealing with revenue originates in the House, but it has to pass in equal form in both the House and the Senate. So back to that point that was made in the first slide, that any of the money that the federal government spends has to be approved by Congress. Was there anything that you wanted to add?
No, that's basically what I was asking, just to kind of clarify. And then appropriations committees could be a variety of different, oh, I'm not talking about it, I'm sorry, but that's fine, that's fine.
Yeah, the next one, I think, is, in this part, is one thing that I learned along this process. I didn't realize that there was 12 separate appropriation bills, and this hasn't always been the case of how many separate appropriation bills we've had. It's grown over time. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about, maybe getting a sense of the government shutdown. In part, we didn't get these 12 appropriation bills that were due on September 30th. In fact, we didn't get any of them approved by the Senate. But this only impacts discretionary spending. I don't know if you caught that here in this part right here about appropriation discretionary spending. I thought it might be useful to just point out that like only really about 1 out of every $4 that the federal government spends is discretionary. Most of it is mandatory. And so we'll get to that a little bit later, but maybe if I say it more than once, you'll remember it. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, unemployment insurance, federal retirees, like these still get paid out. This is approved separate, this is passed by previous laws that are kind of on autopilot, you know, like the Social Security Act is passed in the 1930s, and so they don't need to approve that every year. It's really just those 12 separate categories, and I think I have a slide on that. This is, and I know this is a little hard to see, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger, but just an example of 12 different areas of discretionary spending. Almost half of it is the military, and then education, health, veterans benefits, transportation, housing, the list goes on and on. And with these 12 appropriation bills that are due by the 30th of September, the last time that we were on time with that was 1997, and they've only been on time 4 times in the last 51 plus years. So it doesn't happen very often. Continuing resolutions are a way to buy time. They're temporary. The U.S. House of Representatives for this year passed a continuing resolution, I think it was September 17th or 19th or something like that, mid-December. And that one is scheduled to go until November 21st. One thing I was just reading this morning, you know, here it is, October 21st. If they don't agree to a funding, reopening the government soon, that the November 21st deadline is steadily approaching. So they're going to have to do a new one in the House of Representatives. But I just want to point out that some of these continuing resolutions can be for a few days, they could be for a few weeks, they could be for a few months, and we've had a lot of them. There was 47 different continuing resolutions that have been passed in just a 12-year period from 2010 to 2022. So I think this is partly why some of us are like, it feels like we're always hearing about these government shutdowns. It isn't just every step, these continuing resolutions need to be reapproved because they're temporary. And then again, they can be for any one of those 12 different appropriation bills. Go ahead, Troy in the back.
Sorry to butt in, but I don't know that you said it directly, but the CRs are essentially like little budgets, right? That they say, we're just gonna keep paying our bills and keep things open as we have last year, so that we have time to debate a new budget to move money around, right? And I don't know that you, just to make that very explicit for everybody.
Yes, didn't mention that. It's essentially keeping the current budget as it previously was as the same. So we're not making any increases or decreases. It's basically keeping the budget as it was.
Yeah.
And again, please speak up. There's just a lot of little details here. And yeah, so it was September 19th that the House of Representatives passed the continuing resolution. And the reason that the government currently isn't funded, so as we know, for any bill to become a law, it has to pass both the House and the Senate. So this is the House. There's about a 5-seat majority in the House with Republicans. But in the Senate is where it gets a little complicated. There's 53 Republicans and 47 Democrats. And so if we had a straight party line vote, the Republicans would be able to carry the vote. However, when it comes to these appropriation bills, you have the potential for a filibuster where one or a small group of number of Democrats could delay or threaten to delay the bill from getting voted on. So the only way to end a filibuster is to have 60 votes to have a vote of cloture. So essentially you need 60 senators to agree to this budget, this continuing resolution. There was 3 Democrats who voted with almost all Republicans to vote for this continuing resolution. And then there was 1 Republican who voted with the Democrats. So essentially they're like 5 votes short. So that's something to kind of keep your eye on. Really, there's just an additional 5 senators that need to be enticed to vote with the continuing resolution. But since they're 5 votes short, that's why we're at this impasse currently with the government shutting down.
You're doing great.
Okay. We just have one slide to the history of budget shutdowns. I thought, though, one other link I'd share. This is a very busy website, I think, with advertisements. Sorry about that. There was just this link here that I thought was helpful. I'm sorry to be advertising for NBC, but and I don't know how well you can see this in the back, but really there's been a handful of shutdowns in the last 45 years or so that lasted more than 3 days. Sometimes these are like over the weekend, and sometimes it's just one or a few of those 12 appropriation bills, so they haven't always been full government shutdowns. But there's a handful that really come to mind. So we have this current one, and then we have the longest one in US history was December 21st, 2018. This was essentially the border, President Trump at the time wanted approximately $5.7 billion for a border wall. There wasn't enough votes. The Senate unanimously passed a continuing resolution without a border wall, but Democrats didn't want to provide that money, and back to that needing 60 votes. Ultimately, not that we need to go into too much detail with this, but ultimately the Senate provided like an additional $1 billion of the $5 billion that he requested for a border wall. The 2018 one, this was, 2013 was the 3 I just wanted to cover, the most significant ones, 2018, 2013, and then the 1995 one. So the 2013 one, I think, is also worth mentioning. One dynamic I think is worth pointing out, especially in 2013, and then also in the 1995 one, there was election the year before. So there was a 1994 election where Republicans took over the House and the Senate. And then in 2012, there was an election where Republicans just dominated and took over the House. And the dynamic, I think, is worth pointing out, and we'll get to this later, but in some ways, those Republicans feel like there's a mandate that the people have spoken. They're unhappy with the current president, and in the 2013 case, they were unhappy with the Affordable Care Act, AKA Obamacare. And these House Republicans were brought into office to repeal or to block and change the Affordable Care Act. And so they feel like unless they get what they want, they're not going to fund the continuing resolution. They're not going to fund the government. A similar dynamic played out in 1995, where Republicans, retook Congress, especially the House of Representatives. Newt Gingrich, they had this contract with America. They wanted to cut government spending. So what I would point out is that's just kind of like the structure of our political system in some ways is to blame for that, because of course the president feels like, well, I was elected for a 4-year term. The people have spoken in favor of me. And if we go back to the Obamacare 2008 presidential election, between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, it was entirely about health care, who was going to represent the Democratic Party. The debates between Democrats was almost entirely about their stance on reforming the healthcare system. Obama won overwhelmingly. It was just a huge blowout victory in 2008. Democrats had a supermajority in the House and the Senate, so they passed this Affordable Care Act. I'm only going into so much detail because, as you may know, this Affordable Care Act is resurfacing 15 years later as another reason for this current government shutdown.
Do you want the slide on the?
Just in a minute. I just want to point out that I think presidents too feel like they have a mandate, that they've been elected for a 4-year term, and this is difficult to resolve. They're both right. The House of Representatives is elected most recently, but the president was elected by all Americans, and so we've got this system that is designed in some ways to have some conflict. So just know that partly our presidential system, a separation of powers and checks and balances, in a highly polarized system that we've had in the last 30 years, is going to be prone to these situations where you're playing hardball with the other political party. So yeah, I think I've covered this slide, and so yeah, what happens now during a shutdown? And it's impossible to do this justice with one slide, but I do think it's important to point out that first point. And thank you to Mary. She stayed up all night last night improving. If anybody's watched any of my presentations before, you know how bad my PowerPoint slides are. So Mary helped clean this up, made it a little bit more visually appealing. So one key distinction is we have government workers. Some of them are still working. Some of them are furloughed or essentially not working. And the people both of these groups of people are not getting paid.
Some are getting paid.
Some are getting paid now.
Congress is getting paid.
Congress is getting paid. Military is now getting paid. And then now it looks like Trump's going to try to find a way to pay the air traffic
So is it fair to
controllers.
say, pardon me, Congress is
Yeah.
getting paid, but most likely their aides are not getting paid?
Correct. And then Supreme Court justices are currently getting paid.
Federal judges are getting paid, but again, probably their aides are not getting paid, I would assume. Yeah, for a while, I think military benefits, not benefits, like you'd say, like monthly benefits, but active military were not, I think they did miss one paycheck, but now they just got one, so.
So this essential versus non-essential. Essential workers would be air traffic controllers.
Who are not getting paid.
Not getting paid.
Yeah.
About 40% are on unpaid leave. 750,000 workers who are furloughed and not getting paid. They should get paid retroactively by law, but President Trump has threatened to not retroactively pay some of these workers, and we'll get to is also firing some of these workers as well.
I think it's interesting even to see the dynamic, because there have been stories, I'm not sure, Kevin, if you've seen these, but like where some of the congressmen are still going into work, trying to get things done for their constituents. Is this more of like kind of for optics?
Yeah.
Or if it's just kind of to maybe prove a point that we really need to kind of work together and get this thing going again. But the idea of the air traffic controllers, and I know you have that on a slide later on. We're starting to see a lot more of them saying, oh, I've got the flu. That's a job that's not for, it's not the easiest job to work under normal circumstances, but if you're going now on weeks of not getting paid doing that job, that's a kind of a scary thing.
Yeah, we will definitely revisit these very, very important people, air traffic controllers.
Who already were dealing with kind of being understaffed and undermanned. We were just kind of, I think, at the term of the turnover from the Biden White House to the Trump White House, we're starting to get back on track of being short-staffed, and this is a bit of a not good timing, let's put it that way.
So at the second point, we did talk about this already. Keep in mind, like 3/4 of the government is still kind of functioning as normal,
Right.
as a government can be. So people are still getting their Social Security checks, Medicare benefits. However, the next one down about reduced government services, so there could be delays in getting applications or verifications for Social Security, changing your address. This isn't a great time to be calling any government hotline, including the IRS hotline.
Mm-hmm.
If you're applying for a passport, a lot of these government services are going to be either delayed, partially closed, reduced hours, and this, national parks, government reports, and just as one example, things like the national NIH grants or CDC projects. I have a family member who works for an organization that does research for these organizations, and they just get stop work orders. So the organization just lays off workers. They're no longer able to produce these reports. Some of these reports are important. Or not some of them, they're all important,
Right.
but for various reasons, I think
Some are more important than
the
others.
lack of having these reports, some of which help us with knowing what the cost of living adjustments are going to be for Social Security for next year, retirement savings accounts, like what the changes could be based on, again, inflation and cost of living. So those types of important research that's just being stopped, federal grants that are being canceled, food assistance programs, preschools, museums, reduced hours, closures, things like that. So it's really hard to do justice to the government services. Right. It seems like some national parks, they're still open, but the welcome centers may be closed.
Nothing's being
The
cleaned up.
bathrooms aren't being cleaned out, or there's definitely, and I know there's some vandalism that's happening. I saw a headline at like Yosemite, and this happened last government shutdown too. When you don't have the same number of staff there, sometimes there's more vandalism.
And they already had
garbage.
they already have some reduced
Right.
services. I will say though, actually, passport services are, I just got my, I went several weeks ago, and right the day before the government shut down, to apply for my passport. Great timing, right? And I did pay extra, thinking that depending on when it would, and I got it just 5 days ago
Expedited.
already. So it already was expedited. So that is working. Obviously, the post office is working too. But I'm not sure if passport services, are they being paid? State Department, I doubt it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think this is where it gets a little confusing. Like some of us, I think if you interviewed 1,000 people on the street and asked them, is the government
Right.
closed? They may be like, what? Because many things are kind of happening as normal. Okay, so this last part, this is from the Treasury Secretary who cited that the shutdown's costing approximately $15 billion to the U.S. economy per week. And so this is just a net negative for the economy. And I think the economy, of course, could be in a precarious spot as it is. And so you've got people who are not getting paid. reports that are not being done that could improve economic activity. So those are just a few of the consequences for people like us. Okay, so, with any fight, there's always a lot of different reasons of why there's a fight. we're going to try to focus on like three main reasons of like the two political parties' main stance. And although we're going to mention three, I think the main one that the Democrats are focused on is the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, health care. And so we'll start with that one. And part of this is, we have as voters or as citizens a limited attention span. And so it's better to probably focus on one key complaint or issue that you're focusing on. And I think that's Democrats. Healthcare has been a popular issue amongst their voters. And so to Democrats, what they want is an extension of subsidies for the Affordable Care Act premiums. These are set to expire December 31st of this year. These subsidies are popular. Kaiser Permanente poll shows around 75 to 78% of American citizens support these subsidies. And right now, some people, like at Moraine Valley, we have, as an employee, we have open enrollment that's starting. And so for many people, you're getting from your health insurance provider, you're getting a letter that's showing you what next year's premiums are going to be. I think in something like 12 states already, give or take, those letters have been sent out. And so there's going to be sticker shock to many Americans when they see that their premiums are going to go up. And I have a link I wanted to just show a few different parts of these tax credits. One thing worth pointing out is that the initial Affordable Care Act, like one reason people don't have health insurance is you can't pay for it. I remember Obama when he was campaigning, he's like, it's like kind of like telling a homeless person to buy a house. You don't have a house because you can't pay for it. So one of the ways to make health insurance more affordable is to give people subsidies. I've used this example in the classroom, like your tuition is subsidized by the state of Illinois in property taxes. You may feel like your tuition is too high, but it would be about double if you had to pay the full price of being a college student because your tuition is subsidized by the state and local government. So currently, these are the people, this is from a Washington Post article, just want to show you the title, who will lose out when the ACA health insurance subsidies expire. This is from October 14th. This is kind of looking at a snapshot of the different groups. I like a lot of the stories that Democrats are highlighting are small business owners. Many of us know small business owners, and it's really expensive to get insurance when you don't have a big pool of workers. And so, people who like to be their own entrepreneurs, start their own business. One of the reasons people don't leave a big company and go off and do their own thing is because they can't afford health insurance. And so this has been a huge lifeline to many self-employed people. And also just point out that, of course, many people below the age of below the age of 29, college students are a big portion of people who are going to be, who are impacted by these subsidies that would be expiring on New Year's Eve. This is just looking at in the last few years of where these subsidies have expanded the most. And I think this is a weird little quirk and dynamic to this. Politically, Democrats believe in health care and believe in the Affordable Care Act subsidies, but the people, like if these subsidies go away, the people who are going to be hurt the most are actually red states that vote Republican, especially places like Florida, Texas, and Georgia. This is where we've seen the Affordable Care Act health care expansions increase the most. So I've heard some Democratic strategists is like, why are the Democrats trying to shut down the government to prevent this massive change to healthcare policy that is really going to hurt Republican voters and then could change their perceptions of Donald Trump and the Republican Party? So let me just back up for a minute. Many people think the 2024 election largely came down to cost of living, eggs, gas, other housing costs. So people thought it was really hard to pay for your basic needs, and that's why they punished incumbents around the world, including the Democratic Party with Joe Biden, who stepped down, and Kamala Harris, who took his place. And so why not let Republicans kind of bear the brunt of this bad policy change they're going to be responsible for? So maybe we'll revisit that later on. This slide, I think, is really important. So I just want to point out that I always mess this up. The one key part of the expansions of these enhanced credit premiums, and I can't find my notes here. So this was designed to be temporary in 2021 under the, help me out, Troy. What was it called in 2021? Not the infrastructure, the American the stimulus plan.
Yeah.
Build Back Better?
Build Back Better,
Yeah. So it was
Or
designed.
Inflation Reduction Act?
Inflation
Yeah.
Reduction Act was designed to be 1 year, and then the next year they extended it until 2025. So I want to point out that everything you see in this, I don't know if this is going to work, in the shaded area here. So Democrats, essentially, with Biden and Democrat majorities in the House and Senate, they passed these enhanced credits. We haven't always had them. So Republicans are going to be saying, this was a COVID thing. You tried to expand health care during COVID. It was initially going to be 1 year. Then you extended it for 2 more years or 3 more years. Now it's expiring. And they were always designed to be temporary. And just see the number of people, especially, like I said, those southern states, where the expansion took off in those years. And this is also really important to point out. This is now looking at the premium that you would pay. So this is at a family that's 150% of the poverty line. Currently, somebody in this income threshold pays no premium. So your health insurance, you don't pay for your health insurance. On January 1st of 2026, if these enhanced credits go away, you're going to be going up to $1,329. So this is just looking at one group of people, but it's a pretty stark change, right, of the impact that it's going to have on individuals. And this would be for groups who make 250% of the poverty level. Their premiums are going to more than double, going from $2,000 to $4,500.
Is that annual number or is that a monthly?
I believe it was annual. I believe it's annual. Yeah. So many people, when you go from paying nothing to $1,300 or from paying $2,000 to paying $4,500, it's either going to really suck and you're going to cut a lot of other things out of your budget, or you're just not going to do health insurance. And so millions are estimated to lose their health insurance. And one of the things that does is, if the healthy people who just can't afford health insurance no longer have health insurance, those of us who have to have health insurance, our premiums go up because now the pool is shrunk by millions of people, and it's generally older and sicker people who are remaining in this health insurance pool. So the premiums could go up in the future as well. And I mentioned earlier that these subsidies are popular. So this is like the main thing that Democrats want. They want, hey, we'll vote for this continuing resolution, but you need to ensure, no pun intended, that these premiums, subsidies don't go away.
I was just going to add, we've said this again and again, but I mean, it's not, for those that maybe don't know, it's like auto insurance, right? The idea of the safety of all those people together. This is something that was even discussed when the ACA was passed back in, when we were debating it back in 2009, 2010. when the public option at that point was on the table and then was taken off. And then was removed, the mandate was removed by the Supreme Court. Was
Right.
that- What year was that?
Well, the mandate was,
So everybody had to have insurance. Everybody had to have, like, and that was what lowered the cost for so many. Once that was kind of stripped away, it seems like the prices started to go up even then. Because this started even before, these premiums have already been going up it seems like they've been creeping up for a while. It didn't, this is now the biggest jump I think that we're seeing, right? But these premiums seem like they've been going up for the past couple of years.
and I would, yeah, Republican, like, health insurance is going up about 6% a year. Inflation is like 2.9%. So healthcare costs in and of themselves are about twice the rate of inflation. That's before you would get to these health insurance costs that could be more than doubling or quadrupling depending upon your family situation. So this is argument number one from the Democrats. This is showing popularity of the Affordable Care Act. It's waned over time, but it's actually more favorable now than when it first
was.
passed. A lot of times we take things for, if the Affordable Care Act were to go away, these things like you can't deny people coverage on a pre-existing condition. You can stay on your parents' insurance until you're 26. So there's really popular elements I think we've come to expect that it's just always got to be that way.
Normalize. Yep.
And so if those things were to go away, which I'm not saying they are, but it would be very unpopular.
And
So
the attempts to remove them in the past have been stopped, right? 2017 being one of them.
So again, this is not the main argument of Democrats, but in my opinion, in our opinion, I think, in the background, like Democrats are pissed off about a lot of things. And you're upset with Trump because, and this is I guess we don't call it a tweet anymore, but this was something that Donald Trump shared on social media. He's referred to himself as a king in a couple different ways. This state of New York had congestion pricing, the city of New York, and he intervened and stopped this, and he basically said something like, "Long live the king." So that's where this photo originates from. But Democrats are upset. We've got National Guard that are being sent to states and cities without the mayors or governors requesting them in places like California, Illinois, Washington, D.C. He's used the Alien Enemy Act. He's deported people to countries that they've never stepped foot in before, including places in Africa. He's had a record number of executive orders in the first 9 months of his presidency. We've had panels before about how in many different areas, he's arguably acting either illegally, unconstitutionally, or both. Things like tariffs, with use of executive orders, this is really taking away the power of the purse of Congress, where Congress should be involved in tax policy. There's been aid to Israel that he did unilaterally without Congress's support. We talked about a TikTok ban before that Congress had passed. 80% of Congress had voted for it. The Supreme Court upheld it. Trump just refused to enforce it. We could go on. The January 6th pardons, politicization of the Justice Department. There's kind of like a laundry list of things that Democrats just feel like, this guy's gone too far, and we don't have a lot of leverage right now. Our only leverage is this use of a filibuster. And if we're going to vote to keep the government funded, we want something in return because our base of voters is really pissed off and looking at us as weak that we haven't done anything about all of these things that we don't really have. We don't have a majority in the House and Senate, so we can't block them on these other things. So this is kind of our leverage point. I think all of us have had a fight where you're fighting about this one thing with your significant other or friend, but it's really about all these other things that have been making you mad for a long time.
And I think it's worth pointing out also that support for the Democratic Party right now is still lower than that of Trump. That despite all these things, people don't trust the Democratic Party right now. It's that it's like the most unpopular, what was it, the last rating, was it about 30%? Is that what it was? So
It's bad.
It's bad.
Right.
So you've got to do something so that you're seen as at least trying to stand up for something.
The last complaint of Democrats, this is a little I know this is like from
Peanuts.
50s or 60s with Charlie Brown here, but if you've watched Charlie Brown and Lucy pulling out that football all the time, every time Charlie Brown's got to try to kick it, and he always is like gets convinced that he's finally got to kick it this time. And this is kind of where the Democrats are like, we can't trust you. 3 different times this year we've had amendments to extend the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, and not once have you voted for this. The one big beautiful bill that passed over the summer, you could have extended subsidies then, and you didn't do it. Like, why would we believe that you're ever really going to support these subsidies? And related to that, they would say that you haven't abided by previous acts of Congress to spend money in a specific way. Rescissions are when Congress has voted in you don't need to filibuster, so it's just all you need is 51 senators to overturn previous congressional authorizations for the use for spending of money. Impoundments is even worse in a way because it's the president unilaterally. Congress has appropriated money for, let's say, the Department of Education or for NIH grants or for USAID, and then all of a sudden unilaterally the president's like, no, we're not going to spend the money that Congress has already agreed to spend. And so why would we agree to a new spending deal with you without getting what we want when you have violated all these previous agreements? And now, in the midst of this shutdown, Trump has, in his Russell Voigt, the Office of Management and Budget Director, has fired a lot of government workers as a way of kind of retaliating against Democrats. This is really illegal, and so they feel like you're just violating our trust, and so we're not going to work with you. So these are kind of just 3, I think, main arguments for Democrats. Similarly, Republicans have a whole bunch of arguments. I'm going to try to, I think, distill it into 3. The first one, I tried to have a picture for hostage taking, but I didn't want to like scare any of you. All the images I found were kind of scary with somebody holding a gun to somebody's head. But the first one is like the Speaker of the House, Johnson, is like, well, we did our job. We passed a clean continuing resolution back in September. And so we've done our job, and now it's the Senate's job to vote for what we've already voted for. And this hostage taking is basically saying, Democrats, you're in the minority, and you can't shut down the government because you're not getting this Affordable Care Act subsidies that were designed to expire. Like, wake us up when you actually have a majority of one of the House or the Senate. That's when you can have this power. You shouldn't prevent the government from being funded to get your pet project. And when we go back to 2018, where Trump wanted his border funding, I think I could come up with quotes where Democrats were saying Republicans were holding the government hostage. And I could definitely find you quotes back in 2013 when Democrats are like, Republicans, you just won the House of Representatives, you don't control the Senate, you don't control the presidency, you're holding the government hostage. So like, regardless of your stance, I don't think that this is a good precedent to be setting. Even if you like the Democrats, what they're doing right now, you're kind of saying, this is the way we're going to do things going forward. So when Republicans are in the minority and you are trying to fund the government, you've kind of set this standard. I don't want to say they created this standard, but it's being validated that the way to get what you want is to shut down the government. And again, it takes 2 to tango. I'm not trying to say it's, I want us to, like, I just don't think that this is, whenever my students have asked me about this in the past, I don't like this hostage, and it's not really hostage taking, but I think you get the idea.
Metaphor.
And that's what I mean. Like, Democrats and Republicans are both guilty of this. They have, and now Democrats are hostage taking, if you will. Republicans have in the past. They've both done it. It's just not, I think, a good way of doing business. Yeah, they've always hated Obamacare. I mean, this is what the Tea Party in part got. So, and I'm referring to things back in 2010, but when the Affordable Care Act passed, there was a huge upsurge. You know, we had this No Kings. There was this no Kings protest over the weekend. Some of you may have heard of it. Some of you may have attended. There was all kinds of those types of things happening when Obama was president because of the Affordable Care Act. Arguably, Republicans got elected in 2012 because of this. Trump has said he's going to repeal and replace it. I mean, this has been a big animating motivation of Republicans for the past 15 years. They do not like the Affordable Care Act. So getting them to fund this now, these were some of the kind of posters back when the Affordable Care Act initially passed, is just not something that they want to do. I referenced this, Jan.
Play the what-if game with me. What if Romney had been elected president in '08 and he installed it as Romney Care because it was his Massachusetts
Right.
plan that Obama based his plan on?
Yeah.
Would they be upset about it today?
Well, a couple of things. 15 years ago, some of you, may have been 3 to 5 years old.
even
So
that.
you weren't paying
If even
attention
that.
if you were that, But when the Affordable Care Act passed, this was two key elements of this were that you had to have health insurance or you had to pay a tax/fine. Obama campaigned against that. And then he also campaigned for a public option. A public option is an example, like this is a public school. You could go to DePaul, you could go to St. Xavier, you could go to a private school. This is a public option that competes with those private schools at a reduced cost and really good professors. But Obama campaigned for the public option. Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, has neither, those two things that he wanted, he didn't get. So to your point, Jan, this is like the Cato Institute, Romney, a Republican, if you don't know who he was, he ran for president in 2012. These like the core part of the Affordable Care Act is like Republican conservative principles.
When he says public option, do you know what he's talking about? A public option?
A
I see
public
some that were kinda like that.
option would be where the government creates a health insurance pool that's largely subsidized by the government to help compete against Blue Cross and Blue Shield and private entities. That was I was succinct in it, but that was the example I was trying to show about there's public schools that compete against private
That lower the
schools
cost.
that try to lower the cost. By this school, if we didn't have public schools, private schools would probably charge more. So just keep in mind, essentially what this Affordable Care Act did, everybody's got to buy health insurance, and you got to buy it from a private insurance. I mean, the Democratic base is like, this is not what we wanted at all. And so in some ways, it's a little curious that Republicans are so upset about it.
Even though it has enormous popularity in many red states.
Yeah.
And Medicaid has been expanded in many of those states as well, which I think is an important point to note as well.
A couple of points I don't think I mentioned with that last slide. Republicans are saying this costs $35 billion a year, these enhancements that are set to expire. So they would say, we need to come up with, where you got to get that $35 billion from. Of course they're popular, but a lot of things that are expensive that people don't pay for are popular. So $35 billion a year. It's really generous to higher income people, these enhancements that passed during COVID. It allows people who have incomes 400% above the poverty line to be eligible for subsidies. So at least according to my math, that's at a minimum of $128,000 income for a family of 4, you're still getting subsidies to pay for your health insurance. So Republicans are saying that this is kind of subsidizing the higher income individuals. This is from the Cato Institute. The subsidies not to individual taxpayers, but to insurance companies. So it kind of pads insurance companies' bottom line. And according to the Cato Institute, they say that there's over 11 million people enrolled in these insurance subsidies plans who have never filed a claim. And I think part of their argument is insurance companies are signing people up, and sometimes the people who are getting these subsidies have no idea that they even have a health insurance plan. Okay, so these are the Republican talking points against these healthcare expansions. There's also been 100 anti-abortion groups who have written a letter to Republican members of Congress that say, we don't want any more taxpayer subsidies that could be used on health insurance programs that could possibly pay for elective abortions. I'll mention it because it's sometimes covered in the news. I think this is not accurate, but there's this argument that healthcare is going to, Republicans would call them illegal aliens, Democrats would call them undocumented immigrants, people without legal status. This gets into a real technicality. People who are refugees, who are actually going through a legal process, could be eligible for health insurance. It is illegal to provide government health insurance to anybody who is not a documented citizen. So that's where it gets a little bit he said, she said.
And doesn't some of that money, though, also cover, doesn't that go back about, is it 15 years when that, or even more than that, when the provision was put in that if somebody goes to the hospital, regardless if they are legal or not, I mean, and this is a question I've posed to my own students, if somebody's bleeding out and they have an accident and they go to the hospital, should they get treatment? And everybody raised their hands and said yes, because, and that's regardless of their, whether they are legal or not legal. It seems more of just sort of a basic humanity to offer.
Yes.
Right,
I
right.
didn't
So we're
know that.
50 years ago, right. It was longer than, yeah.
So under Ronald Reagan, a Republican kind of godfather, if you will, of the Republican Party, a requirement that hospitals basically have to stabilize and treat
Thank you.
somebody when they go there, regardless of their legal status. And so some people don't have the means to pay, and so there's Medicaid subsidies that go to hospital. You know, I feel like that's a little different. That's not what these health, Obamacare, Health ACA
No,
Act
but they're,
enhancements.
I think it's being lumped into the
Yes.
same argument,
So
though.
taxpayer dollars could technically, it's like less than 1% of all Medicaid spending at a hospital treating people who are not citizens in emergency situations.
Right.
But that is separate than what this debate about.
Right.
But then you get away by saying, well, taxpayer dollars are going to support undocumented citizens.
Which is the main,
see
kind of
what
one of
I'm
the
saying?
mainline talking points, though, often that you're hearing from
Yes.
people like Mike Johnson, et
It's a
cetera.
bit of a shell game. Anyway, I finally found the title. So it was the American Rescue Plan Act in 2021 that initially created these subsidies, and then it was the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022 that extended it through this year. So I apologize for not getting that right earlier. But basically, these were designed to be temporary. And I do think, regardless of your stance on this issue, this happens a lot. The tax cuts that Trump and Republicans passed in 2017, they were set to expire this December 31st too. Republicans would say clearly they prioritize extending those, and they did under the one big beautiful bill, as they call it, this summer. But we do this a lot where we have provisions that are temporary, and there's a little wink and a nod where Congress knows, like, oh, we just make this deadline right before the next election, and then Congress never wants to bear the brunt of not extending this temporary plan, and so it gets kicked down the road. And it may not be you, but if we extend these for 2 years, 2 years from now, we're going to be having another panel about extending these. You see where I'm going with this when we make things temporary. It just kicks the can down the road. This is, I think, our second to last slide. And this is just kind of getting at a few random thoughts, takeaways. Trump shared this meme or video. I'm sorry, I'm 48. I don't know the right term for some of these things. But Russell Vogt, this Office of Budget Management and Budget Director, as a grim reaper, like, hey, haha, Democrats, you want to shut down the government? Well, we're just going to close all your Democratic, like, there's a $2.9 billion transportation project to extend the Red Line. I think that's relevant to people who live on the south side of Chicago. We're just going to cancel that project because, haha, that's going to help a Democratic area. It's a Democratic House of Representatives who represents that area, and we're just going to start canceling projects. Collectively, I think there's like $30 billion worth of Democratic projects that are being canceled, and we're going to lay off Democratic-leaning agencies. Department of Education has like completely been gutted. I'm going to get this right. Like, there's an office for special education within the Department of Education. This hits home for some of us, hits home to me. It's the principal education office that oversees billions of dollars that supports 10% of all of our school-age children. It's going to have fewer than a half dozen employees, a 95% reduction in staff. So that's just one office. Another one, the Civil Rights Office, essentially is going to have hardly any employees left. They've gutted the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. So there's kind of a few things here. It's like, if you remember back to the Elon Musk Doge days, where they're like slicing and dicing government without, again, congressional approval. It's kind of curious that the Republicans want to reopen government when they've been essentially closing aspects of the government all along. Another takeaway here for me, the U.S. House of Representatives did pass that continuing resolution September 19th, but they haven't met since then.
Yeah.
So some people would argue, like, you should meet in session and you should negotiate and you should have votes and you should, be doing the work of
willingness
Congress,
to-
not be closed for a month. There's a little weird quirk to that. Democrats would say Johnson doesn't want the House to meet because right now they're just closed. They're not opening up. There was a special election in Arizona. This is really inside baseball, but there was a special election in Arizona and a Democrat won. And she would be the 218th vote to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. So one of the benefits of Republicans in Johnson right now is by saying, oh, well, we had our vote on September 19th and we're just not going to meet again until the Senate passes their version, is they do not have to seat, they're choosing not to seat this House of Representative from Arizona who got elected, who would be the 218th vote to release the Epstein's files. I think we mentioned this earlier, like kind of Republicans in Republican states are most likely to be receiving these enhancements. So it's a little curious that Democrats are kind of saving Republicans from the consequences of this going away. And then lastly, before we get to questions and comments, really, that 60 vote threshold to end a filibuster, which you call a vote of cloture. There's nothing in the Constitution that says we should have a filibuster. It's kind of an informal rule, really, in the Senate. And back when that time period when the Republicans took over the House and became really cantankerous with Obama in the back half of Obama's presidency, there was all kinds of federal judge openings. Obama's the president, he's nominating judges, and they're not getting hearings. And so Harry Reid, the Democratic leader in the Senate, basically, they called it the nuclear option. But he's basically saying for executive level positions and federal judges, not the Supreme Court, but all other federal judges, it would be a simple majority. So that way a handful of Republicans can't continue to thwart Obama being able to nominate judges. I get the timing right. It was 2017. Republicans used that same nuclear option for Supreme Court justices. The 3 Trump nominees for the Supreme Court, none of them had more than like 54 votes. Normally, they would never be a Supreme Court justice because they used the nuclear option. They didn't need to get to 60 votes. Republicans could use the nuclear option for the filibuster once again. So if they truly wanted the government to be reopened, they don't need Democrats' votes. If they just did away with the filibuster, this idea that you somehow need 60 votes to end debate before you can first vote for a up or down vote. And I lied. The real last vote, who holds the key here? Or who holds the key? I think, one key group of people to end the shutdown. Did you see them? Air traffic controllers. So these individuals, at least currently, are not getting paid. And so they could call off sick. And some of them, maybe you're an Uber driver, maybe you're moonlighting doing something else. These people already are working 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts. It's a really stressful, arguably one of the most stressful jobs that there is. we've had already some people calling in sick, and then you have like, I think it was
Airports,
the airport,
Burbank.
Burbank, California, they were
Shut
just
down.
shut down for, 12 hours of the day,
Their
things like
traffic
that.
had to be diverted to the closest airport nearby.
So once we start seeing this happen, where these people start calling off in large numbers, and you start going to O'Hare and Midway, and flights aren't taking off, a lot of these people like us, who, government shutdown, I don't know what that means, I don't care. Now you start to care, now you're pissed off. You're supposed to be going to New Orleans, or you've got a business trip, whatever it is. Now you're calling your members of Congress. I think these people really hold the key to how long we can have this government shutdown. And this all started, I always start my class at the beginning of each class where I say, what do you guys want, anything you want to talk about in current events? And I think it was Felicity had brought up, what about the government shutdown? And I was like, okay, let's talk about that next Tuesday. This, because I think you had asked, is this going to be the longest in U.S. history? I think it is now, but it's probably going to be these people, probably around, November, where we're not going to get into Thanksgiving where we've got flight delays. So anyway, final 10 minutes for any questions, thoughts, reactions.
I do have a microphone for questions so we can get it online.
Yeah.
So gentleman in the front, you want to hold on for the microphone?
Could they start just paying air traffic control at any time, or is that just set for?
Say that again?
Could they just start paying air traffic control?
Like the way
anytime?
they're paying the military, you mean? I mean, I suppose they could find the funding if they wanted to.
Yeah. So this is another interesting dynamic here. Trump has said that they're going to find a way to pay the air traffic controllers. They've also found a way to pay the military. Congress should be doing this. So it's really cool. I think everybody, if you ask Democrats and Republicans, should we pay the military? I mean, there's going to be very few people who say, no, don't pay the active military people, or don't pay the air traffic controllers. That's popular. We have to be careful here. What is the precedent? If the U.S. president being able to go around Congress and
Exactly.
using their own little, I don't want to call them slush funds, but money that Congress hasn't appropriated, taking money here and using it over here, this is where, go back to the Declaration of Independence of some of the concerns they had against the king. You cannot bypass what the framers created as the most powerful branch of government, Congress, to dealing with these spending issues.
But to be fair, you've also had a Congress that has been abdicating their authority for years. It's not just only, I can't say it's only with Donald Trump. This has been going on for decades.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question about how you're saying that they're cutting funding, especially in the special ed department. I know that they're doing it for grants and stuff like that. How are they just passing, how are they just I know this sounds like a dumb question, but how are they just doing that without, checking with other people? And is there a way to stop that or fight it?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and I meant to also have a disclaimer, there's some things that the way I describe it doesn't make sense. I could be more clear. And then there's things that I may have been clear about. This just doesn't make sense, right? And so you should be like, wait a minute. Congress created the Department of Education. I want to say 1979, give or take a few years. But that's an act of Congress. You may dislike the Department of Education. I know many conservatives who do, and that's fine. You can use a new act of Congress. We have a House and a Senate that's controlled by Republicans, a Republican president. Then you can pass a new law that takes,
Abolishes the
yeah,
cabinet.
abolishes the cabinet. But what they're doing is firing people and making it not functional. And now they're going to be using the argument that, well, it's not functional because there's only 5 employees and they're not able to
doing their job.
they're not able to carry out their functions, and so we're just going to disband it. And so again, I just like to put our ideological lens away and just say, if you don't like it, then use an act of Congress. You should not have the president and their staff be able to just effectively eliminate these positions. And surprisingly, the Supreme Court, when they ruled on this, I don't remember if this was over the summer or in the fall. I felt like we were having an event. I can't keep track of time now. But they essentially upheld Trump's ability to do this, which, is historically very curious that you would allow a president to essentially do something that I think
You mentioned that in September.
in September, yeah.
Well, and I don't know if like sometimes their recent rulings have been on the shadow docket. So their argument is we're going to temporarily let this go. So we're ruling in favor of the president to give him leeway with his argument, and then we'll do a full ruling later. So I've
Yeah.
lost track on which is which. But
true.
it could be a year and a half. Like sometimes it takes 2 years to get through the full process with the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And so I think it's sort of a way for the Supreme Court to kind of punt
Yes.
and push it down the road and like let things happen. So
Which
But
they've
what
been doing
happens
more and
when
more
you-
of.
When you don't fund, if you don't get money for a certain number of months, and just thinking like, and I know these aren't comparable, but if your parents, you're living on your own and they didn't give you money for 4 or 5 months, you know, that you've effectively, oh, now I got to move back home. Now I've lost my, you know, so it's allowing the dismantling to continue when you upheld for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
I hope we answered your question.
Thumbs up. It's a good question. Sometimes the simplest you may think is the best question to ask. Other questions?
While we're waiting for the next question, like, where's the blame lie? Like, if we played the blame game, we're not asking you yet, but be thinking about that. Like, you know, did you find our summary of the arguments on the Democrat, Republicans more persuasive? A couple questions before we get to that.
I just wanted to ask if the government shutdown is actually harming the Democrats more than it's helping them, because the Republicans are just using it to get what they want without anyone stopping them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think in some ways we're always looking to the next election of the way these things could play out for Democrats and Republicans in 2026. I think on the one hand, raise your hand if you heard about Affordable Care Act subsidies before today. Okay. Well, you're the best and brightest American government students. Democrats would say at least there's now attention on a thing that there wasn't attention about. And so maybe they're winning that way. Mary and I have had a lot of debates between us. Like, I don't know if you remember, back in March, we were close to a shutdown back in March. And some people, like us, disagreed. Like, what should the Democrats do? And so I don't.
People were being
yeah,
fired
like,
at that point.
I think like you're playing, like, what is the best bad option that you should have? Like, Democrats have a bunch of bad options. And so I do see this as probably in some ways more harmful to the Democrats, like how some of these positions, the layoffs, the canceling of federal contracts. I think the biggest loser is Congress as a whole, because their power is being eroded, and we see the power of the presidency increase. But because of that, Democrats I think, should not be happy about that. So I do think that Grim Reaper slide was kind of the idea that's kind of like, all right, Democrats, you asked for this. And I'm not saying that they did ask for that. I'm just saying that I think the Republicans and Trump is like, okay, we're going to make you pay for not working with this.
And take advantage of the situation, too.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know. It could be a losing strategy. But at least there's more attention on, I think, ultimately, if I were to guess, these Affordable Care Act enhancements are going to be extended eventually, probably not in the same form that they are. I think that it's probably going to get scaled down based on, not people who are 400% of the poverty line. And there's probably going to be other conditions to it. But I'd be willing to bet that these ultimately get extended. And maybe because of that, Democrats feel like that's a success.
That was kind of where I was going, is that should they come back and say, look, we'll scale them back for the enhanced subsidies, but it's still going to hurt some people if they don't put them into an extension at all.
Yeah.
And should they come back and just let Republicans who are getting these subsidies, especially in red states, realize, wow, they're really standing up for me instead of, you know, my constituent or my representative in Congress, should they let it happen so that maybe they do better in the midterms?
Yeah. I've heard somebody say, help me with the name, Marjorie Green Taylor, or is it Taylor Green?
Taylor Green.
I can never get the order of that right.
MTG. She's got a.
MTG.
She's like RBG.
Arguably one of the most MAGA members of the House of Representatives, is one of the most outspoken people in favor of these subsidies continuing because her adult children. And I think she's reading the room that
Yeah.
these go away, people are gonna be
Many of
upset.
her constituents are going to be hurt by it.
Egg prices were like a few dollars, and people lost their minds
Yeah.
over egg prices.
Yeah.
We're talking thousands of dollars. We're talking people losing their health insurance, and then you get really sick or break an arm, and you got to go to the hospital. We're talking tens of thousands of medical bills that you could have due. You know, over 500,000 people have bankruptcies related to medical expenses.
And this is the only country that this happens in. This is the only place this happens in.
I do think it's interesting that that it needs to be noted, the shift in the Republican Party during this shutdown is different than the Republican Party of past shutdowns. And I think it's fair to say, and I just objectively, the Republican Party has argued for smaller government probably for 100 years, maybe longer, right? But that part of their philosophy in a smaller government was efficiency, and that if we were in control as a Republican Party, not to say I'm a Republican necessarily, but use that word, speak for Republicans, I guess, that they would be good at running government, that government should function, and that if Congress passed a law, they would carry out that law.
Right.
Now, something has changed in recent times where they've taken this idea of being anti-government, not just smaller government, but now becoming really anti-government, to the point where if government doesn't function and government fails the people of the country, they sort of just shrug and don't care. And maybe that's fine if you're part of the Republican Party and you think that's great. But also, I know many people who say they're Republicans, that to me, that should be something that at least should be reflected on. Like, if we have a government, shouldn't we expect the government to function, right?
Right.
And like dismantling the Department of Education, dismantling the environmental protections, all different kinds of things are just being ignored and ripped apart. And they're kind of saying like, look, it's smaller government. Isn't this great? We pay less in taxes. And it's a marked objective shift in the stance of this party. And I think it should be noted that, so I think that's another factor of this, that I think the Republicans feel like that they're winning because they don't care if government works and they're happy to let it roll. And I think the Democrats have their back against the wall where they've got to find one way to fight. Since they don't control the White House or Congress, they feel like this is at least them putting up some sort of fight against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And this could be record-setting, and I worry about what's left, the smoldering ruins of government by the end, by January.
Yeah. Yes.
My 2
Well
cents.
said.
No,
No, well said, yeah.
Wonderful job, Professor Nabertol.
All right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
These are
Thank you,
excellent.
everybody, for coming today.
Excellent job.
Appreciate your questions. Thank you for
Great job.
helping out.
I didn't do anything. I did literally nothing.
So yeah, for my students, I